Hello, the purpose of this video was to demonstrate a few code examples of some of the common string methods used in Java. So first of all, I just created a couple strings, and some of the problems use these strings, some of them don't. I don't know, apparently I was just on a roll of some strange things, like I don't really like cats. Sorry, I don't mean to offend any of you cat lovers out there. And I used to think I was so cool and I could spell the word Mississippi, Mississippi. I still think it's fun. And I really miss school. I miss you guys. And COVID-19, I'm so over you. I'm so ready to be done with this. But alas, we must move on. So if we take a look at how our string methods work, basically the method .length is simply going to return the length of the string, and it's important to remember that our indices begin at 0. So if I look at the word, the string S5 COVID-19, there are 7 letters here, so it would return a length of 7, which we see from our output when I ran it, and the indices would go from 0 to 9. All right, so one of the things that I put in my little study guide handout from last week was you should be able to manipulate your string and do a specific task. And so an example that I meant by that would be, let's say you were given a task where you wanted to replicate this kind of output. And if we know that our original string looks like this, COVID-19, and I want to print, oops, that should be a capital C, and I want to print 2 letters per line until I run out of the string, then I would think about, okay, well, how could I do that? And there's a couple different ways that we can do it. One of the ways that I went through doing this here was I used substring. I thought this would be a good way to demonstrate how to use our substring method. So first of all, I created a for loop, and with my for loop, I started at the beginning of my string, and I went until the length of the string, and I did length minus 2, and I'll talk about why in just a minute, and then I increased I by 2 every time. So that way, I represents the index of the starting character. So if we were to look at the string COVID-19, my first character is index 0, index 0, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then the next starting index, the V is 2, and then the D is 4. So if I want my I values to be 0, 2, and 4, and I'm starting on 0, I need to count by 2's. And so that's why I have this I plus equals 2. I could also say I equals I plus 2, and that would work as well. So it's just the plus equals is our shorthanded notation. What you cannot do is I plus plus 2. That would not work. And I can't even spell can't. Oh man, it's been a rough day. All right, so now let's go ahead and take a look at my print statement. So by using a print ln, that's going to have me go to the next line, which we know, and then substring I comma I plus 2. So remember, when you use substring with 2 parameters, you can take, it starts at the first one, so that would start me on position 0, 2, 4, 6, and so forth. And then it's going to go up to but not include. So that's why it goes up to but does not include position 2. Goes up to but does not include position 4. You can also think of it of, if you subtract these 2 parameters, I plus 2 minus I is equal to 2. That would take 2 characters. That's another way that I could think about this. Now, if I were to take out this minus 2 here, now here's what's going to happen. As I go through here, let me just run the code and we'll see, oh snap, I get an index out of bounds error. I'm trying to begin at 6, end at 8 because I plus 2, but my length is 7. Oh man, that's a bummer. So I can't do that. So instead, what I did was I said, all right, I'm just going to do length minus 2. However, if I just do that and run my code, that prevents my error from happening. But then what I could see is that I never get the 9. I get the COVID-1, but I don't get the 9. So I added this last line at the end outside of my loop. And what this last line is going to do is it's going to print the last 1 or 2 characters. Because let's say my string happened to be an even number of characters long, then I would have 2 remaining unknown characters here. So in this case, what I did was I said s5.length minus 1. And so what this does here is this is going to give me my substring from length minus 1. And it's going to go from that position till the very end. And even if, let's just say I changed my string to have an asterisk here, and I were to run it again, Now, I will see. Oh, snap, that didn't do what I wanted it to. Hold on, where am I at? Oh, I'm losing my place. Oh, this should be -2. That's what I did wrong. Okay. Then let's run that. There we go. I don't know why I had -1. That must have been a typo. So essentially what this is going to do, since I'm stopping my loop from going to those last two characters, what this is going to do is this is going to get those last two characters. If there are two, if there's only one, then it will just get that one. And that's how I can get either the 9 or the 9 star in my case. Okay. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was working within this index of character. And this was something that people were saying that they were having a hard time with. So if we were looking for the first occurrence of a letter, what we could do is we could just use index of. So what I did here was I have my two strings. So I have S2 and S3. Let me just copy and paste them down here just so that we can remember what they looked like. I don't know what we would do without copy and paste. And as we see when we're looking at them, wait, is that S2 and S3? What do you know? I managed to pick two words that don't even have a B in them. I'm telling you, I just cannot. Mississippi Blues. There we go. Okay. All right. And here's my output that shows my location of my B. So in this case, I wanted to find the first occurrence of a capital B or a lowercase b. And so what I did was I first made my string to lowercase, and then I just checked for the index of lowercase b, rather than running through the problem 2 different times, because I didn't care if it was capital or lowercase. So this allowed me to do that. So remember, we can stack these method calls, and it's going to go from left to right. So I'll take my string, it'll make it to lowercase. And so remember, this does not change the string. Right here, this part that I've highlighted, that returns a lowercase version of that string. And then that lowercase version then has the method index of called upon it. And then that returns the index location. And so since there are no B's in Catch Me If You Can, it returns -1. And there is a B in Mississippi Blues. It's located at index 12, and that's why a 12 is returned. All right, now if I wanted to find the last occurrence of the word is, so again, we are talking about Mississippi, MISSISSIPPI. We wanted to find the last occurrence of this IS. I can just use this method, last index of. And what this does is this finds for every occurrence of the sequence IS, it finds the last one and tells me where it begins. And this last one begins at position 4. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that right here is where we see the last occurrence beginning of the IS. All right, so now let's say I wanted to see how many times a particular word appeared in a string. So here I'm using the string S1. So let me copy and paste this down here. Just making a mess out of this code. All right, so since we don't know how many times the word cat is in this code, or even if it is at all, we'd have to use a loop. Now, this is not the only way that you can do this. This just happens to be the way that I did it. So what I did was I created this location variable, and I created a counter, and I made a new string called search. And essentially what I did was I first said while the location is not equal to -1. And I did that because eventually we are going to reach a point where the word cat is no longer in my string. So when that happens, I want to stop. However, the first time through, I don't know if the word cat is in my string. So that's just why I set location equal to 0, so that way my while loop would run through the first time. You could also use a do while loop, which is a post test loop, and it checks at the end. I just went with a while loop because I feel like you guys are most comfortable with a while loop. And then I did, okay, I'm going to take my search string and I'm going to look for the index of cat. And if that index is not -1, so the first time through, I'm going to find it, and whatever that number is, that's what LOC is going to be equal to. Since I found it, I'm going to increment my counter. So count is going to equal 1. And then now I'm going to update my search string. And when I update my search string, I'm going to update it to start at the location of where I found cat, but I'm going to offset it by the length of cat. So wherever this was, I'm going to add 3 to it, and now I'm going to extract this substring. So that's the new search string that I'm looking for. And now I'm going to do the process again. And since LOC is equal to my previous location, it's still not equal to -1, so it'll run through again. So I check, it's found, so I increment my counter again, I re-update my search string, and then I search, and then in this point, cat is no longer found again because now my search string is just s period. And so this will not run, my while loop will not run again, and what will happen is it will print out the number of times that it was found. All right. If I wanted to check if 2 strings are equal, we have equals and equals ignore case. We're pretty good about using these. It's super important that we use equals ignore case whenever we don't want case sensitivity to matter. All right, so I went over the compare to quite a bit in the other video I went through. And so here I just had a couple different examples. I left the code in here in case you wanted to play around with it. Since, I did talk about it in the other video, I'm not going to run through it again here because there's one more thing I wanted to talk about. So the last thing that I wanted to talk about was the immutable strings. So I created 3 variables, a string, an int, and an array of ints. So an array of ints, this is an object. And remember that when you are working with objects, if you pass an object into a method, that object is passed by reference, so the method can change it. A string, while it acts like an object, it does pass by value in a method. Okay, so what that means is that changes that you make to this variable are not going to be withstanding when you come back from the method. And then this is an int, and any changes you make to this, these are all always passed by value. All right, and then this here was passed by a reference. Okay, so here what I did in my code, if I run this, is I just did a couple quick print statements. And before my method, I printed out test string, which was sample, and test int, which was 10. And then I did a quick for statement to print out all the values, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then after my method, I printed again, and we'll notice that sample and 10 did not change. I printed this new string, which is what was returned to me, sample new. Ooh, so this is different. And I now have different values in my array. So that shows me that my array did change. So let's take a look at what this method's actually doing. All right, so if we take a look at this method here is taking in a string, an int, and an array, and it's concatenating onto the string, it's adding 5 to the int, and then it's going ahead and it is adding 1 to each value in the array, and it is returning the new string. So since the new string is returned, that is why right here when I print the new string, what I'm actually printing is the value that was returned from the method. Notice that the string that was passed into the method never changes. That doesn't change at all because it's immutable. The only way we can change a string is if I return a modified string. Now, I want you to notice there's 2 different ways I did this +1 in the method. Now, on the surface, they both look identical. However, they do not give identical results. If I run my code again, I'm going to see that in this way of running things, my array values don't change. And the reason why is because with a for each loop, this value x takes on as a temporary variable. It is not able to change the value, oh, I can't type, the value of a primitive variable. Okay, you cannot do this. You cannot change the value of a primitive variable in a for each loop. Okay, it doesn't let you. You have to use a regular for loop. If it was an object, you could call a method on each one in a for each loop, but not on these primitive values. If we were to switch this back to the way that I had it when we started the problem and run it again, now you will notice that these values actually did change. And when I changed values here, the changes withstood. And the reason why is because ARR is a reference variable. So I'm going to that spot in memory and I'm adding 1 to each of those values. Here, I'm just adding 1 to a temporary value. So no changes withstand after you leave the method. All right, so that's it for today. Like I said, I left a bunch of other sample code in here for you to play around with. Thank you.